Hi everyone, Rose Webster here. I want to take you back to when the Olympics started in Rio. When I was quite concerned, I posted this for CBC News. I was worried that obtaining antibodies to Zika, whether it be vaccine, sex, or mosquito, doesn't set humans up for a much worse or fatal reaction from another infection within the flavivirus family. And I wondered if ADE, antibody-dependent enhancement or cross-enhancement, was a factor in the Utah case. You remember that gent? He had like 100,000 times or something the viral load in his system, and his caregiver's son ended up getting infected, and they surmised it was because of tears or something. Now, Dr. Halstead explained ADE this way. Over time, you can keep protective levels of antibody from the initial infection, but you lose cross-reactive antibodies. This allows for a second infection to cause severe illness. And the longer the interval between infections with different strains, the more severe the disease. Now, moving right along, in October, and this is 2016, so we're talking almost 2 years ago, James Whitney, a virologist at Harvard University, infected 36 Mackays with 2 different strains of Zika, one from Thailand and one from Puerto Rico. And here's what you got to keep in mind. The strains that they're using have to be from the areas that have Zika, because there's a lot that goes into this. So, and what they found was that the Zika persisted in the male testes, prostate, semen, and cerebral spinal fluid, and that's the fluid that bathes the brain and spine. It was also detected in saliva and urine, but transiently in vaginal secretions. So this is really disturbing. They looked at the brains of a few of the monkeys about 1 week into infection and found it had infected the neurons of the brain called the cerebellum, which helps coordinate movements. And this was around the time I made that light bulb moment where I figured Wolbachia is the cofactor. Zika is the phage that enables Wolbachia to infect vertebrates. And Wolbachia can survive at least a week outside of a cell with no decrease in viability. So keep that in mind. So I just want to show you the map here where these releases are ongoing, and they're also ongoing in Mexico. The red, the purple, and the yellow. The yellow spot is where they've been carried out for the longest, 20 million per week in 4 different facilities, largest mosquito factory in the world. Okay, a lot of strange things going on in Taiwan where, or wherever these introduced bulbul species are, which is disturbing. Now, here's the thing. Wolbachia-infected Aedes are released by the trillions, and it's been since 2009 in various regions around the world. More recently, in 2016, it's been New York, Kentucky, Florida, and California. And then in 2017, in the fall, the EPA fired half its scientific advisory boards and allowed its release in 20 U.S. states. And this has been kept under wraps really well because there was only like 13 people that knew about it. So here's the deal. You release these Wolbachia-infected Aedes, and the Wolbachia remains in the larvae, pupae, eggs, all life stages. When these Aedes decay, die, are consumed or partially consumed, the Wolbachia inside them is picked up by something else. That's a certainty. That's not a maybe. Aedes don't live very long. So these things either die, decay, are consumed, or partially consumed. And what happens is seabirds will consume the Wolbachia from mosquitoes, larvae, aquatic species. Culex bite birds and then bite humans. They bite birds early in the season in the spring. And viruses that birds carry can be amplified by a bird 1 billion times, in fact. I'm not exaggerating. And then from July to October, November, they bite humans. And this is where West Nile gets transmitted. Well, West Nile and Zika share the same clade. And this is something that's been denied by even a chief of epidemiologists. This is when I fell off my chair and thought, wait a minute, I have to tell the truth here, because it's getting crazy. Now, copepods in the water, there's one type that can destroy 40 Aedes larvae. And if you look on YouTube, you'll see videos of these little things will just nibble away, destroying them. Well, The Wolbachia inside them lives at least a week. Something else will acquire it. So this is why whales and penguins are dying, and so on and so on and so on. Now, I got totally bashed over me wanting to have the North Atlantic right whales tested when 18 of them died. Well, it was more than 18 because based on research by Dr. Hamilton, for everyone that washes up, 4 or 5 are out at sea. And in marine biology circles, they're saying, no, it's more like 10. So there are hundreds. Minke whales too now. There's about 160 of them died. We're not hearing about it, of course, but if you dig deep enough, you'll find out that hundreds of whales have died, baleen whales. This is key. Now, this kind of shocked me. I was looking up how Wolbachia might impact men trying to conceive, and I found this. I found superfoods for men trying to conceive: oysters. Well, again, since 2009, this has been released en masse. And we have a study that in 2010 that, yes, Wolbachia pipientis has been found. It's very similar to other pathogens within that DNA sequence and likely to have possible detrimental effects. So filter feeders will be the first to be impacted. Now, the way this ties in, and I came to realize this is why millions of dollars are spent on climate change, because there are environmentalists and activists and people that are in the know and just biology buffs that want to love animals, want to know why are these species dying? Well, climate change had to become the excuse. And when the whales died, I heard that, oh, climate change caused their food to move. Well, if you look through the report, none of them were starving. That was ruled out. And even if their food did move, they moved very slowly. I have a petition about that has over 1,000 signatures. Now, CBC almost always disables my comments, and I don't know why, because I follow the rules. But here's one post that was quite interesting. Dr. Schoches was tasked with providing science-based advice on everything from climate change. Well, that says it all. Because in 2013, Canada only made up 1.3% of the global total greenhouse gas emissions. And I tried to reveal what's going on, but it was disabled, but I do want to show that. Now, Bill Gates and Margaret Chan were sitting together, and I think to myself, okay, the WHO managed to endorse Wolbachia-infected mosquito releases even after it was shown to infect a human. Chen Dong et al., 2015, and in 2003, it was shown to grow in human lung cells. Now, that should have stopped this cold. But no, it's ongoing in the US, scheduled into 2019 in Brazil and Singapore. Now, I want you to know what the WHO is all about. It's not about consensus. And here's a couple snippets from the Sydney Morning Herald with Dr. Adarand when he was trying to along with 3 other doctors and people involved in public health, over 200 of them signed a petition trying to get them to move or postpone the Olympics or make it sort of different locales around the world so that we didn't have Zika coming back with everybody. Because here's the thing, 80% of people have no symptoms. 80%, that's very high. So 20% are the only, that's all you're hearing about. That's all the only people that go to the doctor maybe are 20%. So here's the deal. The WHO wanted to get him on board, but to sign a clause that prevented him from discussing deliberations. And he crossed off this confidentiality agreement in the clause and added the words not applicable to inconsistency with academic freedom. Well, they revoked the invitation. And Dr. Adarand said that one paragraph is really poisonous. We now have a WHO commission person saying, this is what the scientists think. And he added, with all due respect, I know not everyone in the room would think that, but I know beyond doubt. But of course, in the room, people could be sued for saying so. So you're given the illusion that there's consensus. There isn't. There really isn't. And same with climate change, or what used to be called global warming. Now, This is disturbing. I have tried to let the Canadian government know, the Red Cross know, and Canadian Blood Services know that the minimum time, according to the New England Journal of Medicine, these are people with PhDs and Masters in Public Health. They're all named here. The minimum time that persons who have potential exposure to Zika should avoid donating blood is currently 120 days. 120 days is 4 months. India implemented that. Canadian Blood Services didn't. They felt 21 days was enough. And in the US, 28 days was seemingly good enough. And I left numerous messages. And the answer was always, it was all a canned response. The risk of Zika virus entering the Canadian blood system is extremely low. We will nevertheless continue to monitor the situation. Well, I heard the same from Dr. Teresa Tam. Monitor the situation. Well, how is it someone like me can find this out and they're supposed to be monitoring the situation? Now, here's something you probably don't know. November 21st, 2016, over 500,000 blood donations tested positive for Zika. That's almost 2 years ago. There's a lot more people who have Zika than you're being led on to believe. And Jay Epstein had said Zika virus is a transfusion-transmitted disease which can cause potentially severe consequences, including microcephaly and Guillain-Barré syndrome. The requirement to test blood donations for Zika virus has already resulted in interdicting contaminated collections, confirming the value of testing. Well, guess what? The FDA panel voted against testing donated blood for Zika. Can you believe that? That's on my YouTube page. That's the highlighted video. Tina Marie from the Red Cross, the American Red Cross, was sort of hoping 28 days was not exceeded. And I said, well, it's a shame, a waste of valuable resources, staff, blood bags, needles, if they don't extend it. A whopping 80% of those infected have no symptoms. So how are these donors supposed to know within 28 days? And I took a screenshot of that. And she said, she said, I believe the 28 day is the symptoms waiting period, as you should know within that time. 80% have no symptoms. You should know within 28 days. Okay, here's another CBC post about the rapid extinction of vertebrate species, and they're calling it the 6th extension. And there was this big post about 15,000 scientists are saying climate change and blah, 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 and the 6th, and we're all to blame and all this crap. Well, here's what you're not being told. The presence of a virus facilitates the invasion of Wolbachia. Strobe et Teschlo, 2015. Wolbachia should be further evaluated as causes of human infection, especially as Wolbachia infection of mosquitoes is increasingly considered to be a tool for interfering with mosquito-borne transmission of human pathogens. Chen Dong et al. And the filaridiococcal gene was not found, which points to mosquito-to-human transmission. That means no worm. So they've taken the most pathogenic part the worm emits and put it directly in a mosquito, in Aedes. And we're all told to believe that this genus is going to crash and it's going to keep down Zika and chikungunya, and they've added in a few others lately. Oh yeah, it's going to suppress dengue and all this other stuff. No, the Wolbachia in it lives, and I believe it acts as a bacteriophage. The virus goes right into the Wolbachia. It's saved in a dead host for a good week till Culex comes along and picks it up, or a tick picks it up. Right? The presence of a virus facilitates the invasion. So could be a bird, a bat. They have a lot of viruses. A human that gets Zika from blood donation, right? And this Wolbachia becomes the cofactor. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. So, and I have a little more there you can look at. Some is under a paywall, so it's cost me a lot. Now I want to show you something from the climate change people, because it really is ridiculous. Okay, with the UN, here's the deal. The UN, the WHO, these are branches. The WHO is a branch of the UN. Now, Dr. Richard Lindzen, who's a genuine climate expert, resigned from the IPCC process after his contributions were completely rewritten by the panel. And Czech President Klaus stated, "It's not fair to refer to the UN panel as a group of scientists. The IPCC is not a scientific institution. It's a political body, a sort of non-government organization of green flavor. It's neither a forum of neutral scientists nor a balanced group of scientists. These are politicized scientists and UN bureaucrats who arrived there with their one-sided opinion and one-sided argument." And the same holds true in the scientific community. And here's a good comment by James Ryder. And I follow this Tom Nielsen guy because he's very sharp. "It's bewildering how Al Gore came out of nowhere with the climate agenda, with apparently no previous interest in the weather, and no one seemed to question his credentials or who his backers were. Utterly bizarre." And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see I get berated all the time. They throw anything at me. My appearance, the fact I'm female, the fact I don't have an MD or a PhD, even though I've had a PhD try to plagiarize me, and a couple other researchers with masters try to get my research for nothing. So it's pretty incredible how one-sided the media gets it. And Bill Gates gave over $1 million to ABC News to cover his whatever he's doing for the poor, apparently. The media, the problem with the media is this: it's not the journalists, it's in their clauses that an editorial board can rewrite anything or change anything. And I talked to a writer who was paid well by one of these mainstream media. His complete message was changed. And he was against people going to the Olympics, and it was totally revamped, and I'm sure he was very upset. So we've come down to a point where you have to find the people you trust, because the mainstream media, and I'll show you more on the CBC. I think I have a few more posts about it. But we have a real problem with ethics, with the media, what you're told. You're told half-truths. In fact, you're told 5% of the truth, because Aedes only represents 5% of the major disease-carrying mosquitoes. So you're not even told half the truth. Now, I studied a little about workplace bullying, and here's the deal. 57% of the time, bullying works for the bully, shill, and/or troll. And it really does turn people off. And I have clear examples even on my Twitter feed. 40% of people will look at this. They may be more educated than me, have a title chief of something or other, whatever. They'll do nothing, 40%. 13% will ostracize, isolate, or avoid the target, okay? And the target is the person presenting the facts that other people higher up in the food chain, if you want to call it that, don't like, even with credible evidence. And 4% will side with the perpetrator and then end the relationship with the target or victim. 4%. So I know some doctors have been badly abused, and I always speak up, but it's only 10% of people will help the target publicly. Privately, it's 16%. But get this, 57% of the time bullying works for the bully, shill, and/or troll. This is how Hitler got his way. Think about it. Now, there is a problem with gender. I hate to bring it in, because the last thing I want to do is say, oh, poor me, I'm a female, nobody's listening to me. In school, my teachers never made me feel like I couldn't do something. It wasn't until I got in the working world I was told, oh, you're just a waitress, you're just a college grad, you're the low man on the totem pole here. You got no power. It wasn't until I got in the working world. So I do want to post this because it is more, men in positions of power to stop females from bullying other females also don't get involved. And I studied this a lot, because they're afraid of some perceived favoritism or some perception that they're sexually attracted to one of those females. So there's a lot that goes into it. But I'll tell you the truth about Zika. It's been the women that have been ahead of the curve on this. Dr. Ayers is the one that deserves the John Maddox Prize. She warned the WHO in February 2016 So again, 5% Aedes represents a small percentage of disease-carrying vectors. Culex are 20 times more prevalent than Aedes. They're night active in almost anywhere, Canada, UK, Europe, except for in Denmark. There's not many there, no Culex star cells, hardly any there, and men have increases in their sperm counts, unlike Western men that have plummeting sperm counts to the tune of 60%, which should have everybody jumping up and down. Because if it happened to women, we'd be hearing all about it, wouldn't we? This is why I don't call myself a feminist. Because all the feminists the feminists in politics seem to care about climate change. Well, the climate is always changing. So what a great label that's become. Now, here's the global range of Culex vectors here, red, purple, and green. And really, there's a genus of Aedes, I think it's Aedes vexans, that covers the whole U.S. that actually can transmit, I believe, and I could be wrong, I think it's West Nile as well. So really, you've got a huge range of this vector. Now, this was over a year ago, July 2017. I read about the sperm counts declined by more than half for Western men. I wrote to the two doctors at Mount Sinai, heard back from one of them, just thank you, nothing since. And they found it was clearly not genetic. It must be something in the environment or modern lifestyle. Well, modern lifestyle. Now we have a lifestyle disease pandemic, don't we? I'll show you that later. So here's, because people like proof, I have proof of everything I'm claiming, everything. Danish population between 96 and 2010, sperm concentration increased. Well, Wolbachia's been toyed with for over 30 years, mostly in China, in South Asian countries there, despite what you've been told. Now, here's something that I can't get over. Dr. Tam is supposedly monitoring the situation. She didn't think Culex was a big deal. Well, in April, I believe it's April, where is it? April 2018, Culex in Florida transmit Zika. Here's the warnings. Now, thing is, they began with Wolbachia releases in 2016 in Florida. It probably didn't take, because of the hurricane season, into the Culex species there. So they started again in 2018 from February to July 2018, every week. Perfect timing for bulbils there, and there's some in the Miami-Dade area, to naturally to get Zika and the Wolbachia, and then the Culex to pick it up from the birds, and it would be very amplified. I imagine there's a lot of ill people in Florida right now, and New York. And here are the other teams. Evans et al. Did a beautiful job of showing that even the Aedes vexans, I believe, can transmit this. So it covers the whole of the U.S. It's not just the little areas you're told with just Aedes, which is 5% of the mosquitoes you have to worry about. And here's a little bit of my article about the case for Zika acting in tandem. Well, October 10th, 2017, Dr. Duragan confirmed the presence of compartmentalized strains of Zika. In one patient, we found compartmentalized strains. The virus present in his semen was different than the virus in his urine. In all cases, the pathogen found in the final stage of infection wasn't the same as the virus that entered the patient. Well, to me, that points to Zika getting inside different Wolbachia bacteria, and we've got different strains that do different things. And depending on host conditions, some target the optic lobe, retina, cerebral spinal fluid, liver is a big one. I'll show you the GQ protein tissue expressions coming up. This is the 2003 study that should have stopped at cold. Bacterial growth could be obtained in a human embryonic lung fibroblast monolayer at 28 and 37 C. Well, I noticed they didn't put the Fahrenheit, so maybe they were hoping people that don't realize 37 C is average human body temperature. CBC once again disables my comment. There's nothing wrong with it. You can post to as many CBC articles as you want. And the only other post was the source of that study that said Wolbachia could survive outside the host cells and would increase the probability of successful horizontal transfer. So here's this. I want to show you that. You can always pause to read it. Moving along. Now, April 16, 2018, a study came out that showed probably what was my worst fear, is that Wolbachia increases the mean and variance in Aedes aegypti susceptibility to dengue infection. So Wolbachia actually enhances dengue transmission. So what that tells me is dengue gets inside the Wolbachia that's in there. Remember, this gets maternally inherited. And Scott O'Neill even said 6 years on, after they did experiments in Australia, 90% of the mosquito species in that they don't live 6 years, but in that family, 90% were still infected. Well, it's going to take decades to restore the ecological balance. What we need to employ are copodologists and various people. And I don't know why Canada ended the National Wetlands Fund. 60% of Culex lay eggs near open bodies of water on leaves and grassy areas. And grassland species have plummeted like 69%. Again, this should have people jumping up and down, but what it can do, it ended that whole wetlands funding conservation thing. They ended it. So here you go. And from Ozotec, which took the brunt of the blame in Florida, it kind of got it wrong, because Ozotec thing is a 2-gene modification in only the males, and when the males die, that's it. The thing ends. Not maternally inherited like Wolbachia, which can introduce over 1,000 new genes with unknown consequences. So I think that that activist got killed that was protesting it. She had over 200 odd thousand signatures. And I thought, oh my God, they just got it wrong here. That's not the worrisome thing. That's the distraction. So Ozotec also pointed out Wolbachia significantly enhances West Nile virus and Culex tarsalis, enhances malaria, and things can still transmit, Aedes albopictus can still transmit chikungunya and dengue virus. Well, now we know, somebody has found out, and I suspected, it was my worst fears, that it didn't really stop it in Aedes. It hides the virus within it, because the bacteria, Wolbachia is bigger than some of these viruses. Some of these viruses, I think it's only 40 microns is what Zika is, very tiny. So here's another content disabled post on CBC you can read, just so you know whereabouts I'm going with this. I'm trying to get the word out. Tell you the truth, I'm not very successful, because the people I've sent it, no, I'm not getting any positive response that anybody's going to do anything about this. We're just going to sit back and watch. Now, here's something that I've gone through on Twitter trying to explain this very gently, because people I even see doctors posting it. France, you're an idiot, because measles, the anti-vax, they're just all blaming the anti-vax. Guess what? Anti-vax is not that populous. It really isn't. Parents are a lot more educated, a lot smarter. There's a few people that are anti-vaxxers, but not like you think. Now, Brazil did releases prior to 2014 of some field releases, but these were never tested on vertebrates or birds. And then 2014, they had a mass release. Now, you got to keep in mind, Brazil maintained a 95% vaccine coverage over the last 10 years, and then was declared measles-free in 2016. And then millions of infected Brazilian mosquitoes with Wolbachia. This was released, I guess, 2017. And then you started to hear that Brazil has measles. Well, 2014, if we look at what's happening in nature, because it's the earliest signs, it's not what happens in humans, because we live in houses. We're not as exposed as some species are to what's going on in the biosphere with the pathogens. So in 2014, Iceland's seabird colonies were vanishing. And this is a key point. Jennifer Provenker, I hope I'm saying that right, said, seabirds are critical for detecting changes that are happening even more rapidly than we suspect. And she said, we are basically getting a year-to-year update of the health of the oceans and the health of the environment through these seabird studies. And I couldn't agree more. And the migratory path here fits with when things started to get nasty with Zika spreading and what looks like measles. Although, you see that in 2018, only 4 years later, suddenly we have measles in the UK, even though the year prior, it was declared measles free. Okay, so let that sink in. And here's your proof, since people don't like me telling them. Daniel Sexton, David Walker, spotted fever group rickettsiosis. That is difficult and sometimes impossible initially to distinguish spotted fever group rickettsial infections from dengue, typhoid fever, malaria, drug reaction. I can't say that word, viral infections such as measles, rubella, and arboviral and enteroviral disease. Occasionally severe infection due to R. rickettsii or R. coronari can mimic meningococcemia, staphylococcal bacteremia, toxic shock syndrome, leptospirosis, viral hemorrhagic fever, or thrombotic whatever purpura. I can't say them. I kind of know about them. Okay, it's not that I don't. I just can't enunciate very well. Now, this correlates with some of the data too. Wolbachia was released en masse 2009 by the U.S. government, toyed with over 30 years, and there were big jumps in what looked like measles. And of course, who's going to expect rickettsiosis? It's supposed to be a neglected tropical disease. So who's going to expect it? I had a conversation with someone on Twitter who said, oh, I live in England. There's nothing like that here, you know. And so here you go. The WHO, global measles mortality, they've even kind of projected it. Well, here's the thing. Just like with climate change, we have a funded lobby called the Anti-Vax lobby. And I'm not saying some of them aren't measles. I'm just saying there's another pathogen here that's been released, trillions of them, since 2009. In 2014, things started happening with seabirds. It didn't take that long. It might take years, but it looks like about 4 or 5 years down the road, things start to progress and birds die, and it can live for a week in a dead host and something else picks it up. Other organisms, ticks, fleas, bat ticks in France have it. So, if you want to keep with the anti-vax community lobby, you know what? That's an endless argument. That just distracts doctors from looking any further. This is the problem with that. Now, September 10th, I had posted this publicly on Google. Holy shit, I just found this study out of China. The gist, Culex mosquitoes can carry and transmit Zika, and we have plenty to worry about in Canada. This is Gua et al. I asked Dr. Fiona Hunter her thoughts, and yeah, she thought that was valid research. Here's another one. The WHO says promising new tools to fight Aedes, and said after almost a decade of research. Well, O'Neill's team in Australia has been working on this since 92 or earlier. This goes back, and the Atlantic had said it's after 30 years of development. Well, here's a sad thought, and I found this in a library. The book Deadly Cultures, Biological Weapons since 1945. The feasibility of an offshore release of Aedes aegypti mosquito as a vector for infectious diseases, the feasibility of a biological attack against an island complex, and the decay rates of biological weapons agents under certain conditions. This was studied. A rather cavalier approach to testing simulants in urban areas, but a good deal of sensitivity was shown in the Pacific Ocean operations. And this goes back to JFK days. It's really chilling when I found this out, and I only found it out this year, when I read over his speech, and people must have thought he was nuts. Now I don't. You know, it's a system of conscripted vast human and material resources into building a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. And here's where we are. Now, here's the startling facts that point to Wolbachia infecting vertebrates. And yes, I know with turtles that temperature has a lot to do with it, but when 99 out of 100 newly hatched ones, I suspect Wolbachia is playing a part as well. Now, we got lots of cover-ups, though. We've got cannabis being legalized, so there's going to be people pointing to that as causing decreases in fertility. We already have it, air pollution pointing to it. I saw a post by Catherine McKenna saying climate change disproportionately affects women more. It's getting silly. Now, here's some of the funding. Since this has come out, I found out that also the CDC invested $4.1 million in it, and the NIH, I believe, $1.3 million in Wolbachia-infected Aedes. Now, my guess is when I look at what's happened in China with the uveal melanoma cases and all the fertility problems, and the excuse we're told over here, oh, they worked so hard, it's no wonder people are putting off having families, etc., etc. No, these Wolbachia releases have been going on, probably experimented with up to 30 years, maybe longer, and now we have a health market there that is $15 billion. Well, my guess is the CDC invested $4.1 million in Florida because, gee, in 4 or 5 years, there'll be a $15 billion return on investment. So this is getting very sad. I do want to show you this because access has been denied to the NCBI website. For me, I've had doors shut in my face so many times, I don't know anything different. It'd be a shock to my system that somebody tries to help me out with this. Again, they Google highlighted search, men trying to conceive should eat raw oysters. And I was stunned that, see, the NIH funds Wolbachia, gave Mosquito Mate $1.3 million in a grant. And then Dr. Fisher and his team, partly funded by the NIH, the scientists all stress the oysters have to be eaten raw. Well, even if you have no background in science, lots of dead whales probably means there's something deadly in the waters. And if you read the early posts, there was no algae blooms. There was no this or that or this or that. They ruled out all that stuff. They weren't starving. But an infectious disease cannot be ruled out, but is unlikely. That was written twice in the report. I combed it. And here's your proof that Mosquito Mate was awarded $1.3 million grant. Look at that from the NIH. So here we are. The 20 states are in red. I should have circled all of Florida. I'm not as sure where things are going on right now. 2016, it was New York, Kentucky, Florida, and California. Fresno, the debug Fresno thing. And the 20 states right next to Canada. Now, what are the chances birds and Culex aren't going to carry it over to Canada, or that the 4 million Canadians that go to Florida a year and many stay for months aren't going to bring it back? I mean, this is silly. And in Florida, Culex have Zika. These are night active, 20 times more prevalent. But Dr. Tam hasn't issued any warnings, Dr. Teresa Tam. I've written to her more than once. Now, DMP53 binds to human P53, which is implicated in about half of human cancers. This very key, Chendong et al., the man was supposedly thought to have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It turned out once he was treated for the Wolbachia infection, which had nothing to do with the worm, he was completely cancer-free. That should be making the rounds in every oncology department. Now, here's your proof that Wolbachia can enhance malaria. And that's from 2014. Now, here's where we're headed. Indonesia, the releases of Wolbachia-infected Aedes began in 2014. 4 years later, 4 years later, we have malaria outbreaks in Indonesia. It only took 4 years. They're blaming earthquakes. Well, guess what? Earthquakes don't actually cause malarial outbreaks. If you looked at other earthquakes, it didn't cause an outbreak of malaria. But that's what you're told. And you might think we have nothing to worry about. Well, half of the U.S. and much of half of Ontario, all of Newfoundland, the Maritimes, and a good portion of the populated Quebec has the common malaria mosquito. So in 4 years, since the releases in New York were 2016, I'm going to say by 2020, you're going to see malaria here. I'm not exaggerating. But guess who has the expensive, costly cure that could kill you? Is Bill Gates. He's got this Crintefel, which presents relapses in 70%. And it's not available in many poor places. It can cause red blood cells to burst open and die. Isn't that great? Can be lethal, but there's a test to see who will respond, and it's called a G6PD test. My guess is this is the big money maker 4 years. This is your return on investment. So the other thing I'm seeing the WHO do is blame the doctors, right? Low quality healthcare is increasing the burden of healthcare. This is all over the place. I saw these posts and I was shocked. It's now the doctor's fault. Doctors aren't good enough. You're just not damn good enough. Even though we're not giving you a test to test Zika, and we're no longer testing for Zika, and we won't let you figure out species with Wolbachia, and you can't figure that out either. Well, even the Lancet Global Health, poor quality care in the health system is now responsible for a greater number of deaths than insufficient access to care. And look at that frightful pie chart there. I mean, they're just trying to blame the doctors straight out. And this gent, I think he's a student, medical student of some kind. To resist radicalized thinking, clinicians and researchers need to become better at appreciating social context and the potential personal and economical challenges that mediate susceptibility or lead to poor quality of care. There you go, JAMA. There you go. It's going to be your fault, doctors. Now back to the field I'm in, and it's the research field. And here's the thing. Doctors kind of rely on the research, and they kind of probably think, oh, somebody's vetted it for being like what makes sense. And what makes sense is follow up on Chen Dong et al. That found Wolbachia genes in the blood. And that would make sense. But no, it's been over 3 years. Nobody's doing anything about that. What we have private journal papers that look very convincing. And the call went out for curbing the lifestyle disease pandemic. So if you're you're either going to blame, they're going to blame the doctors, or the doctors now can blame the patients. Your lifestyle is your problem. This is why you have a problem, because what are you doing? You're looking at the blue light too much, right? Well, here's how it works. Bill and Melinda Gates practically funds everybody. And if you look closely, they have awarded more than 1,300 researchers in more than 65 countries grants in US dollars, $100,000. And successful projects are eligible to receive $1 million. Now get this, no preliminary data is required, so you don't need any Chen Dong et al. Let's follow that up. That makes logical sense. No preliminary data. Applicants can be at any experience level. Okay, so you can have like anyone, just first year anything, in any discipline, okay, chiropractic college, homeopathy, naturopathic, whatever, and from any type of organization. So, I don't know, you pick it, including colleges and universities. So it's not just universities, it's college, anything, any organization. In fact, I could set up you know what, sitting next to somebody named Rose is going to give you cancer institute. And I could get this, okay? This is how low the bar is, but how much information you're being plummeted with to confuse you. Anti-Vax has been pretty successful, I gotta admit. There's a lot of people convinced anti-vaxxers are to blame. And so on. Government laboratory research, nonprofit and for-profit. So for-profit, so if I dream up something like, let's say blue light, because this has worked. Here's a real example. Here's the visible light spectrum. It's a very tiny, I think it's 40 nanometers. It's very tiny. One research team, I think in France, deemed it damages the retina somehow. Okay, and like for hundreds of years, people have been exposed to really bright light, like doing other things like horseshoe making and what they do with tool and die making and so on, and welders and so on. They don't have this kind of damage. Now, this was dispelled. A painstaking study of over 5,000 people over the age of 65 in 2008, the European Eye Study found no link between blue light and outdoor exposure in AMD. Okay? Another misconception, and this is the review of optometry, February 2014. We actually need some. It has some healthy effects. It plays a vital role. People, but I still hear it. Screen time. Well, it's silly. Okay, the light being magnified through your car window from the sun is much more powerful than anything you're getting off a screen. And, for your own physical well-being, you should get up and around and whatever. It's not like I'm trying to say it's okay to be behind the screen, whatever. Now, keep this in mind. There's a high prevalence of rickettsia infections in small mammals in Taiwan. I want you to be aware of this because it's very clever. There's one study about LED lights inducing retinal damage, but it was based on rats from Taiwan, okay? And half of them, and no investigation of the infection status of mammalian hosts in Taiwan was ever attempted. Causative agents and 98% of suspected human cases could not be verified. The CDC in Taiwan will not identify species, even though there are doctors and researchers there working very hard to figure this out. So it's a tragedy. But I do want you to be aware that this 2017, I think it was in the Journal of Ophthalmology, sounds convincing, and maybe the researchers found something in these rodents. Now, mice, what happens in mice doesn't often pan out in humans either, so you got to keep that in mind. But some of these very well could have had eye problems related to the rickettsia. So keep that in mind, because that's probably coming. Here again, as I've said, what is happening in Taiwan and China is now on our doorstep here. I just want you to be reminded there. And now the GQ proteins, this is tissue expression, and in the Wolbachia patent, it names the GNAQ, GNA11, GNA14, and 15. So what this translates a little bit into is where Wolbachia likes to hide. And it's a bit like the getaway car at a robbery, if you want to call it that. If Zika's hiding in it, and it's there, and it gets out in these areas, it really fits with where they found Zika in the McKays and the macaws, and various other people, and including, autopsies. So here we have GNAQ, brain, central cortex, hematopoietic cell, liver, placenta. Now, the darker it is, the more confidence in that area. So brain, spinal cord, liver is big. Cervical, pancreas, retina, testes. I can't read them all, I'm sorry. Pancreas, spleen, epididymis. Liver, lung. So, liver, lung. This is very scary stuff because it could become an airborne problem. Now, so doctors are going to get blamed, and patients are going to be told they have a lifestyle disease problem. Meanwhile, we have Wolbachia, which competes for our mitochondria. It targets the brain, muscles, livers, eye, and all those other areas. So this is a tragedy unfolding. I'm glad you've listened to this all. And hopefully somebody will take some action that has more influence than me. Thanks again.